Back when I was 24, my friend Mason and I took a late spring camping trip to the Ouachita Mountains in Arkansas. I still remember the thick smell of pine and the cool dampness in the air as we made our way into the woods. We both worked construction jobs and had a 3-day gap between projects. Mason suggested we use it to reset and camp somewhere quiet. No crowds, no cell service, just the woods and our gear. Mason was always the more experienced one. He grew up in a rural area and had been hunting and camping his whole life. I trusted him with picking the spot, which ended up being about a 40-minute hike from the closest parking area. It was remote, isolated, silent. We reached a small flat area just off a ridge where we could see the tree lines stretch for miles. It felt peaceful, untouched. We pitched our tents, gathered wood, and by sundown we had a fire going and dinner sizzling on the skillet. Mason cooked bacon-wrapped hot dogs and cracked open a flask of something strong. We talked and laughed for hours, old stories and dumb memories, and let the fire die down to glowing coals. Around 11 or so, we were both stretched out in our chairs when we started hearing what sounded like a dog barking in the distance. Just once, then again, then silence. Mason just said, "Coyote, probably," and went back to sipping from his flask. I tried to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about the sound was wrong. It was too sharp, too controlled, like someone trying to mimic a bark, not an animal making it. We turned in a little after midnight. Mason said he'd sleep light, and if anything came close to camp, he'd hear it. I wasn't comforted, but I crawled into my tent anyway, zipped it up and shut my eyes. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still dark. The kind of darkness that feels thick, no moon, no stars. My eyes opened to the sound of breathing. Not mine, not Mason's. Just outside the tent wall. Low, ragged, and close. At first I thought it might be a deer or something, but then I heard a soft crunch of the underbrush. Deliberate, slow. Then a voice. It said one word. "Cold?" Just that, whispered, drawn out. A rasp that sounded like it came from the throat of someone who hadn't spoken in days. I froze, barely breathing. The voice was right next to the tent wall. I could see the silhouette of someone kneeling down, facing the fabric. I whispered Mason's name as quietly as I could, but there was no answer. Then the voice spoke again. "Let me in." I wanted to scream. My hand was shaking as I reached slowly for the small knife I kept near my sleeping bag. I said nothing, didn't move. The silhouette lingered for a moment longer, then stood and drifted away. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear anything. Just gone. I lay there for what felt like an hour, heart racing so hard I thought I'd pass out. Eventually I worked up the nerve to unzip the tent and crawl out. The fire was cold. The camp was dead silent. I turned to Mason's tent and froze. It was open. I rushed over, heart in my throat, and looked inside. Mason was there, asleep, but his face was pale and sweating. I shook him awake and told him what happened. He stared at me for a long moment before whispering that he thought he had a nightmare, one where something was standing outside, scratching at the tent wall. Neither of us slept after that. We sat back to back by the dead fire with our knives and a flashlight watching the woods. At first light, we packed up in silence and didn't say much the whole hike back. That was 5 years ago, and we haven't camped together since. I've never told anyone else what happened. I don't know who or what was out there. But sometimes late at night, when it's quiet and I'm trying to sleep, I hear that same whisper in my head. "Let me in."